Okay, perfect. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. What an exciting day it is for us to be here at the Global Women's Forum 2020. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Reem Naimi, and I'm going to be your moderator for the day. And we will be discussing the topic of women representation in the government leading positions. And on that note, it is an honor for me to introduce today not one, not two, but three of whom I think are to be some of the most influential and inspirational women of our time today. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our guest of honor, Her Excellency Theresa May, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Her Excellency Shamma Al-Mazrou'i, Minister of State for Youth Affairs. And Her Excellency Muna Al-Marri, Chairperson and Managing Director of the Dubai Women Establishment. Joining us today is yet another inspiring individual who is leading the UAE's march towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Please join me in welcoming His Excellency Abdullah Luta, Director General of the Federal Competitiveness and Statistics Authority. Your Excellency, if you'd like to give a few words.
Good morning, everyone. Today marks a special moment where we all embark as a nation in conversation on influence and women and gender equality, and particularly women's role and ability to influence our nation's progress and our world's development. There's a Chinese proverb that says, women hold up half of the sky. And I think our charge at the Global Women's Forum is to discover how can we make sure that every single woman can touch the sky and let her colors enhance the tapestry of our world. I personally love the Global Women's Forum since its first chapter in 2016 because I think it's really powerful to explore how women can have a positive and influential, innovative influence on how we live in the 21st century, but also how do we do so across each and every single field. And it gives me goosebumps to really say that we're having this conversation in the United Arab Emirates because we are in a nation that gives hope to women. It empowers women to give birth to life at home and at work. And it is a nation that makes a woman a star and gives her the platform to twinkle. I want to share deep gratitude to Her Highness Sheikha Fatma bint Mubarak, the true mother of this nation. There's no discussion about women without mentioning her rich wisdom and her graciousness. Starting the establishment of the General Women's Union in 1973, 2 years just after our nation started. She ensured that women were central and supported from the beginning. And she confirmed our belief that a nation cannot prosper without its women prospering. She models our capacity as women to have arms wide open and wide enough to embrace everyone. I'd like to also thank Her Highness Sheikha Manal bint Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. She's one of these exceptional women holding up our sky with strong arms and hearts. As the chair of the Dubai Women's Establishment, as the president of the Gender Balance Council, and also as a champion of this Global Women's Forum, she is leading the charge to equip women in the UAE to lead initiatives, policies, and shape learning in all sectors across the UAE. We'd like to thank her because she's a champion to so many women. Together, we honor these two women and so many other women whose arms are holding our sky, covering the breadth of so much that women can contribute to and influence at home and at work. And today I'm very eager to welcome and thank all these young people who are joining us on this special youth circle. We're eager to hear your thoughts and your ideas. I'm especially excited to open this first ever youth circle on influence with one of the world's most prominent experts on influence and women and gender equality, former British Prime Minister Theresa May. The Right Honourable May boasts a long career of influence and leadership, starting as a Member of Parliament since 1997, and later in 2010 serving as the nation's longest-serving Home Secretary, a senior most cabinet official in Her Majesty's government. She was elected Prime Minister and leader of its Conservative Party. As Prime Minister, Right Honourable May inherited one of the most complex political and multinational challenges of the modern era, overseeing Britain's infamous Brexit negotiations. For 3 years, she worked tirelessly to build consensus in a notably difficult environment at Great Britain's epic turning point. She could not have managed such a task so skillfully without understanding the value, craft, and power of female influence. I'll add she did so as Britain's second ever female British Prime Minister. Her role as female leader distinguishes her by what she's brought to leadership that was unique and effective. And we all believe in the United Arab Emirates that it's the government's duty, first and foremost, to serve its young people. We're very excited here to explore so many different questions, of which, what is the role of youth in achieving greater gender equality, gender balance, and boosting women's political leadership? I think today is an intersection of young people, of a movement of women's influence, and with a world leader who's an expert in this field. So thank you very much, and we're very excited to hear a few words from the Right Honourable May.
Well, thank you very much indeed. It's very good to be here. It's good to be here at the Global Women's Forum, but I'm particularly pleased to be able to be here at the Youth Circle, because I think, just to pick up something that's just been said, actually we need to look not just at what we're doing today to encourage women to take up leadership roles, but inspire a new generation of young women to take up leadership roles, and inspire a generation of young men to recognise the values and the talents that women bring into leadership as well. So it's very good to see young people here thinking about that future, not just for yourselves, but actually for women more generally, and what you can be doing and how you can be encouraging women for the future. And it's very good to be here in the UAE, because I'm very pleased to see the huge amount of work that has been done here and the real commitment here to that gender balance and gender equality. And we see that around us. And so well done to the UAE for ensuring, and particularly here in Dubai, for ensuring that we have women in these senior posts and showing the talents that women have.
Thank you so much, Honourable. Thank you so much for your commentary, Right Honourable May. So let's get this discussion started. Right Honourable May, I'll start off by asking you a quick question, which is, let us just start exploring what gender equality means, and what does it mean to you specifically?
Well, I suppose I think of it fundamentally as about equal opportunities, making sure that women and men have those equal opportunities to go as far as their talents and hard work will take them. But it's also, obviously, it's also about ensuring that you've got the legislative background that doesn't discriminate against women in any sense, that you have the support mechanisms that enable women to achieve what they want to achieve. So in the United Kingdom, for example, we've done a lot of work in relation to childcare and shared parental leave to give those equal opportunities to men and women. But it's also, I think, about attitude. And it's about ensuring that nobody makes an assumption about what you can do or what you will do because of your gender. So that somebody doesn't look at a young man and think, well, they're going to be a leader, and a young woman and think, well, they won't be a leader, but actually says either of these could be a leader. It's about them and their individual talent. So changing attitudes so there's no stereotyping, no assumptions made, I think is hugely important, and that's when we really will have gender equality.
You brought up the topic of stereotyping, and we can introduce the concept. I'm sure most of you know the topic of gender equality quotas, and there is a sort of stigma that can come along with it. What is your perspective on that topic? And as well, we can open up the floor for our youth here to comment on it as well.
I think this is a difficult subject because naturally I think that quotas can actually not encourage, but they can lead to a situation where people assume that a woman has only reached a position because she's making up the quota. And I think that can also mean that the men in an environment will look at her in a different way and won't try to look at her and her talents, but will assume she's there because she's making up that number. Those people who advocate quotas say, on the other hand, where it's happened, it's by getting numbers of women involved, actually that then leads to a change in attitude. But it can be counterproductive. And so you look at some of the Scandinavian countries, for example, which had quotas for number of women on company boards. And what happened was you saw a small number of women becoming non-executive directors on the boards. The companies met their quota, but it wasn't really encouraging women to come through, to show their talents, and to become a mainline directors on those boards. So it can be counterproductive. So I prefer not to use hardline quotas, but I think it's good to have some sort of assumptions about saying, well, we would like to have so many, and a gender balance on, our parliamentary list, for example, but not have a hard and fast quota. Otherwise, you have people being put there simply to make up the numbers.
Regarding unfairness, there have been some commentaries about how it can actually be unfair towards men. I would love it to hear if any of you have any comments on that specifically.
I have a comment on quotas. I disagree.
That's the point of discussion.
I think quotas are a good solution for the present. For example, if you have more men than women today in boardrooms, it's a good solution to this problem today. But it's not a good solution for the future because it doesn't target the root cause. So for today, yes, I think we should use quotas, but we should take another approach to solve the root cause too. For example, in the schools, removing the stereotypes from the culture, and etc.
No, it's good to have different views on this. And you're right, you get the numbers today. And that in itself can be an impetus, because often in areas, we see it in politics and other areas, actually women don't go into them because they don't see sufficient women there. So, but this is a debate.
I think when it comes to being unfair for men, I do not agree with that point, because usually when we put gender quotas, we tend to focus more on putting how many women in the office rather than how many men in the office. So I feel like the attitude towards us looking at gender quota also should change. And I think maybe initially it is like what you've said, initially maybe it's important for us to maybe put certain type of quota, because I feel like now we are living in a society where there are a lot of women who have attained equal higher education and equally qualified. And because of that reasons, maybe it's important for us to put some women in the space, and then hopefully like in the future, like it will be self-sustained.
I have a question about quotas, in the sense that you said what's important is having equal opportunities. But even in the absence of structural oppression, such as not letting women vote or not letting women run for political offices, don't other pillars of patriarchy that continue to oppress women, such as cultural legacies or historical legacies of like having a disproportionate number of men in government compared to women, having a culture in which women are more encouraged to stay at home instead of going into the workforce or entering politics, like don't these kind of legacies still continue to oppress women even in the absence of actual laws? So in a status quo like this, what is the alternative that is better than quotas to address these lasting legacies of the patriarchy?
Well, I think, you see, what I would say to that is that quotas don't necessarily deal with that lasting legacy. Because if quotas just set an environment where the assumption is the women aren't there because they can be, because they're good enough to be there, but simply because somebody has put them there to fix the number, that doesn't help with the cultural attitude. So it's good to always aim to have, so many women in government, so many women in parliament, for example. But the key to dealing with the legacy issue is largely about, I think, you mentioned education, and ensuring that as young people are brought up, they're not brought up in an environment where there are assumptions about what people will do. But it's the other thing I would say is it's about choice. So it's for each individual to have those opportunities, but to be able to choose what they wish to do. whether they wish to go into the world of work or not, male or female, perhaps in a family environment. Our shared parental leave enables, for example, the father to take time off when a child is born, rather than automatically assuming it's the mother. So it's about setting the background with that legislation, but then it takes time to change thinking and to deal with the legacy issues that you're talking about.
Also, I just wanted to add to that I think with the quota dilemma, one perhaps effective way to think about it moving forward is not to think about it in quantitative terms as in, oh, we are filling a quota within this specific field, but also to associate that with the qualitative and to really think about what it means to have more inclusion of women. And it's the merging of the both quantitative and qualitative that will make having something like a quota more effective. And I get the unfairness point. I get why it may seem unfair. I understand why I understand why having just a number of women in a specific field, just to increase the number of women, may seem like it's not really that effective. But also, I think quotas are corrective in that they, maybe more in the long term, are correcting a history of unfairness. And so I think quotas could be more kind of more of a long-term solution rather than a short-term.
I think we can have one or two more comments regarding this topic, then we can move on to the next one. So if you'd go ahead.
So I was actually interested, we talk about gender quotas, particularly for women, but other studies have shown even within government, there's overrepresentation of women in some ministries as opposed to others. So like family might be overrepresented in women. And so I was curious, how do we establish gender quotas that are also bidirectional? Because if you do establish quotas for women, you're also drawing them away from certain areas. And so looking holistically, how can we ensure we're not against stereotyping women even within the government structure itself?
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. I think the way I think about gender quotas in government is the way we want to view government as whether they want to set an example or whether they want to just respond to what all the people think. And I think there are ways to do both. So if a government establishes a gender quota under the kind of guidelines that, this is just how it will be moving forward, then people will have to come to terms with it and will have to grapple with it, and that will create change, I think, quicker than waiting for people to get there on their own.
Sorry.
No, after you.
Well, I was just going to say, it is right that we need to ensure that women aren't just seen as being suitable for particular sorts of jobs in government. I was pleased as Prime Minister to appoint our first female Secretary of State for Defence, for example. The Home Secretary role that I did, which had been done by a woman previously for a short time, but is not one that had been naturally seen as a role for a woman. I was also one of the Home Secretaries I appointed was a woman as well. So you do need to ensure that women are in those other roles too. In business, I think this is a very important issue because very often women don't get onto corporate boards because they tend to be more prevalent in areas like government relations, human relations, marketing, rather than being the finance director or the operating officer. And it's important to recognise that these jobs are different, the skills may be different, but the skills are just as valuable to the board. The skills that the women have and have learned are just as valuable. And so also opening people's eyes to the fact that women may sometimes approach jobs in a different way, may have different experience in jobs, but that doesn't mean they haven't got the talent and the skills to do those big jobs, to do those leadership roles. And I think getting that message across is very important as well.
Right, Honourable May, since you just mentioned the corporate world, basically. You have worked for over 20 years in the finance sector, which is considered a very male-dominated field. What are some of the challenges and the barriers that you have faced while you were in that sector?
One of the first things I would say to all the women here is that it's important, whatever role you go into, not to, if you like, think of yourself as a woman and think that people will look at you and think of you as a woman in a role rather than as somebody who has the talents to do that role. So being confident in yourself, I think, is very important. But it can be difficult if you're in a meeting room and you're the only woman, and it seems that nobody wants to listen to what you have to say, maybe. Or there's another thing that happens. I don't know if anybody's experienced this. Sometimes if you're the only woman in a room of men and you come up with a really good idea and you say, why don't we do it this way? Sometimes that's ignored. And then one of the men will say exactly the same thing, and suddenly it's a very good idea. And you just have to sit there and think, well, it was my idea, but actually the important thing is to do it, rather than just to sort of say, excuse me, it was me. But I think it's that, this is where the numbers issue that we were talking about does become important, because if you have more women sitting around that table, then you get a different dynamic in those environments and in those discussions.
Lovely.
Actually, I'm very happy to be here. I'm from Oman, and I always find that the youth have so much power in what we do now. It's very interesting what you just said. I was just about to say it. Even when you're at home and you're talking about a topic and you say, you know, let's do this, the men will go, yeah, let's do this. And you'll be like, oh, we just said it. That happens even at home. But from the concept of a psychologist, I think these things should start from the beginning. You know, it should start from home, should start from school. I mean, it should be integrated into our studies. And one more thing, I think now it's changed. Before we used to think that, okay, men are the ones that, you know, they have to do everything and they're going for it and all of that, and you are the women. Now it's the other way. Now women feel it's a challenge. I have to do it. And that puts stress. And then she loses, kind of starts losing the plot in the end, and then stresses herself, then goes into depression. So it's a big, big load. So I would say for every woman, I mean, just live the moment. Be mindful of what you've done, because you keep on running and you haven't noticed you've done so much. You just want to get to that point of, I have to be better than the man, or, you know, it's supposed to be equal, not better or less. And that's the only way it will work, because that's how, you know, the creation, that's how we're brought into this world. And I think His late Majesty Sultan Qaboos, Allah rahmah, he always said that women and men are like a bird. They, you know, that's two wings. It doesn't fly with one wing. And that's something we always think and always. So I think live the moment, be happy with what you are, and thank you so much for all you've done and all your talks and making everybody look at the problem and not just one person. Thank you very much.
Wise words. Very wise words, particularly the live in the moment and don't try to be perfect at everything, because otherwise nobody is perfect at everything.
Definitely, I couldn't agree more with that. Now, if we can go back to the field of politics, if I may say, as we know, women are to some extent underrepresented in that field. From your experience, what do you think are some of the means to boost women representation in the field of in governments and in the political leadership?
I think one of the key things is showing more women in those roles. And I think it's particularly important, for example, I think in the UK, for female members of parliament to get out and about into schools and colleges to show women in those political roles and to encourage young people to think of politics as something that they should be getting involved in, and to talk about the benefits of being involved in politics, the difference you can make to people's lives. I would say here, though, that there is certainly a problem we see in the UK, I think it will be elsewhere as well, of the way in which social media are often used to harass or bully women who are in political life. Sometimes it happens to men, but it's more likely to happen to women. And that often leads women to think very carefully about whether they want to be part of that world. But unless they are, we will never deal with that. Because what the people who are making those comments on social media want to stop the women from being involved. And it's important that women are involved in our political life. So I think the first step is showing women's involvement in political life, showing the achievements women have in political life, and showing that to young people and encouraging young people to see politics, to see government as something that is worthwhile and that they should be involved in.
We learn about something called emotional labor for women, and that's just the conception that women just take on more emotional weight than their male counterparts do. So I was wondering if you could speak to what your experience with emotional labor has been in your years and years of experience in politics, and whether kind of people just expect you to take on more roles or to help whenever they need because you are a woman, or whatever your experience has been.
Yes, I must confess the term emotional labour is not one I've heard before. So I think there is, one of the things I would say that I feel about women in politics is that, generally speaking, they are more interested in delivering for people. And if you like, that's taking on that load of feeling not just that you listen to somebody's problem, but you actually have to solve it for them. And that, I think, can add an extra layer of expectation that women often put on themselves as well. I think one of the advantages of women's involvement in politics, though, is exactly that women will tend to spend more time listening to people, hearing what on the ground people's issues are, and then genuinely want to act on those, to deliver on those, to see some outcome that is going to change people's lives. It's less about the woman as an individual wanting to reach a particular level, but more about what she can do for others. So I'm not sure if that is taking on that emotional labour or not, but I think it is certainly there. But then in politics, you're there to make a difference to people's lives. And if you don't put a focus on that, then I would say then you're not actually doing the job you should be doing.
So I have to say, between you and Margaret Thatcher, I think two of the most legendary women in politics in terms of what you've been able to do, not just in British politics, but globally. And I wanted to ask, considering that you're both Tories in the UK, how, or whether you think feminism and gender equity either gets moved forward faster by becoming a partisan issue, or whether it gets slowed down by becoming through a partisan lens.
Well, I don't think I think most people in the UK wouldn't see it as a sort of issue attached to a particular party. It used to be the case that that question of feminism, gender equality, was very much seen as a Labour Party issue in the UK. It just so happens it's the Conservatives who've elected and appointed the two female prime ministers. But we have in a sense, taken that issue on as well. So there's much more of a cross-party feeling that this is something that needs to be addressed in the UK. I think the danger, you asked whether it's the advance has slowed down. I think the danger with an issue like this is that you reach a level and people think the job's done. That's it. We don't have to worry about it any longer. I would say that you need to continue beyond that point. So in terms, for example, in the UK of getting women into Parliament, I've been active in my own party in helping that. Not to think, well, we've got X number, therefore we don't need to worry about this any longer. You constantly have to be ensuring that you're giving those messages, that you're showing that equality, and that everything that you do is enabling women to take those opportunities.
I just wanted to highlight a connection between the quotas and also the representation of women in politics. And so at the end of last year, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid said that 50% of the members of the Federal National Council have to be women. And I think also going back to Shemma's point, how it's more a method of correctness. And so I think, especially with the youth and like young women, seeing more women in these positions and holding these important roles in politics and in our society motivates them even more. And also having women, having these quotas, I don't necessarily see them as a bad thing, but I look at them in a positive way where we're we're influencing the policies that are being made as well, reflecting the policies that women need, to be made. Yeah.
No, that's absolutely right. And you're right that actually having that larger number of women is doing what we've been talking about, which is showing women in those roles. And that hopefully does encourage other women. And it's certainly true we've seen a greater emphasis in the UK on some of the issues that particularly affect women, with more women in Parliament. That's not to say that some of the men don't also take up those issues, but by and large there's been a greater focus on some aspects of women's health, for example, on domestic abuse and domestic violence. That's an issue that is now accepted as something cross-party in the UK Parliament that needs to be dealt with in our legislation and so forth. So women have that influence. They help to make other people's lives better. That's what being in politics, in government, is all about.
Definitely, couldn't agree more with that. As we can see here, we have a lot of lovely inspiration in young ladies. Right Honourable May, if you would say there are 3 main characteristics that define an effective woman leader, what would you say they could potentially be?
Well, I think the first thing to say about women leaders is women can be every bit as tough as leaders as the men can be, and that's an important message. But I think there are 2 things that women do more naturally. The first I've mentioned already, which is listen to people, and actually listen to people at the grassroots, people on the ground, because in government it's about making a difference to people's lives, and you need to understand what it is about their lives that needs to be addressed. So listening skills, I think, are very important that women have. And also women are more consensual. Kristalina Georgieva mentioned this yesterday in her opening remarks, that women tend to act in a much more consensual way, try to find a way that will see agreement among people, and act more collegiately as well. So with very often a male leader, if something good is done, will say he did it. A woman will say we did it, i.e. the team did it, because it's not just one individual, it's everybody. But that, listening to people and aiming to be more consensual, I think are 2 characteristics that women leaders have particularly.
Definitely. We'd love to also hear from the Director General of FCSA, who also, if I'm not mistaken, leads the Gender Balance Council.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you very much for hosting me, and I've been hearing all these comments and I was saying, I want to say something. Maybe as the only man representing the government sector here, I'm very honored to be part of this great nation, honestly. What we're trying to do here is, maybe I play, or I wear several hats. So I manage the Federal Competitiveness and Statistics Authority, so part of the core business of our entity is to ensure that the UAE advances in global reports year on year, such as the Global Inequality Index, or the Women, Business and the Law, which was mentioned several times during the opening remarks. The UAE was ranked by the World Bank, according to David Malpass, the president of the World Bank yesterday, that was the 2nd best reformer when it comes to laws advancing women empowerment and women enablement. So there are so many things that we're doing right now, not only within our organization, but also with cabinet and other ministers, including Her Excellency Shama, and I'll share with you a story here. But there is the other role which I play is being a board member of the Gender Balance Council. And when we said, we speak about gender inequality, we speak about gender gap, and we decided, just like you said, Sayyida Basma, thank you very much for the word, equality. And we said it's going to be about balancing. So even the board membership is 50-50, men 50% female. And they're decision makers. We can go and get things done. And a sample of the things we got done were the laws that were amended recently. In a span of 3 weeks, and I don't think this will happen in so many nations, and the Right Honorable Theresa May might agree or disagree, but in 3 weeks we passed 9 laws. 3 of them were signed by the President. In other countries, there is a cycle that will take years to pass a decree or an amendment to one clause in a law, not laws themselves. So we went on a fast track to get things fixed immediately. So whenever there is a will, the action takes place. Several discussions were taking place about quotas and about earning the role or about discrimination at work. I worked under men leadership and I worked under female leadership. And now I'm under a male leadership. Please do not quote me on that. But I actually say this in so many places. My golden years were 7 years under the leadership of Her Excellency Reem bint Ibrahim Al-Hashmi, a lady minister who's managing so many files. But here is a snapshot about Reem. And she says, do not call me Your Excellency, do not call me minister. Call me Reem. She's younger than me by 6 years. She's a mother of 3. She speaks 7 languages. She's a graduate of Harvard. She was the youngest minister to be appointed before Shamma was appointed. So there are lots of things, but here is the thing that makes, I think, a lady works with men better. This is my personal view. Women have empathy. Women have passion. Women have unmatchable attention to details. Women have aspirations. And I think, as Her Excellency Kristalina said, the world will be a better place if we have more ladies running the show. And I totally agree with that. Although being a man, I think if we work together without actually thinking about the gender, we'll get things done. But the minute I think of myself as a man and I think of Shamma as a female, will start getting into the discussion. So kill that feeling of I'm a male or I'm a female. You go into the meeting room, you're an employee, you carry a certain role, you have a certain title. The entity have certain expectations from you. You just need to over-deliver and showcase what you can deliver as a human, as a talent, without being called a gender in any specific term. And I think this makes a huge difference. Within FCSA, and I have some of my staff, can you please rise? FCSA staff, please stand up. Female, 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 female. So lots of females in FCSA. I was never told by cabinet to recruit female, or they never actually gave direction on whom to recruit, which age, which nationality, what kind of credentials, CVs, nothing. All what I know of is that for us to progress as a nation, we need to have the best talent. So myself and Shamma, we fight over talent. Okay? Who's going to work for Ministry of Youth, who's going to work for FCSA, and we fight with Her Excellency Muna Al-Marri or Lamia on who's going to work for Gender Balance Council and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, honestly, when I know that Azza works for Shamma, see, well done, good luck, you have all my support. We know that we all work under one umbrella. This is the difference between countries where have different parties, because the party becomes more, I think, personal views, again, do not quote me. The party becomes more important than the bigger purpose. We here in the UAE, we have one party called the UAE party. So it doesn't matter where he or she works as long as they're going to serve the bigger purpose, which is the nation advancement. We won 2 years in a row. The Gender Balance Council launched something called the Gender Balance Award. Honestly speaking, we did not do anything different to win that award. And the award came to us. Year 1, many people said by luck. Oh, because. Okay, first year. Second year, they made it harder, and I know this. Anyone from Gender Balance Council? They changed the methodology so that we don't win, yet we won. I'm serious, yet we won. So it doesn't matter what kind of methodology, if you're doing the right thing for the right purpose and the right cause, you end up performing and astonishing others. Some people say this is unique for the UAE. 4 days ago, I received an email from my staff, Amna, saying that we won an award for Gender Balance Council from a global consultancy firm who evaluates different federal entities around the world, government entities, and see how they progress. And you tell me, how do they calculate these things? Two things. I think it's very important that you measure two things. You measure the soft, the perception. Do you feel that you're equal, for example? Are there any ways of discrimination, harassment, whether male or female, blah, blah, blah. Once you're done with the perception, and you need to give it 50% of the weight. The other 50% of the weight, you say, the women in positions. Do they have equal rights? Give me specific numbers. How many executive directors, how many ministers, how many undersecretaries, how many experts, how many advisors, how many assistants, and so on and so forth. Once you have this math being calculated, and once you have the soft part being done, merge the two, and the results will be robust and credible. And this is what we've done. So my advice to, I see lots of youth and women, and this is a youth circle, be inspired. We're very honored to have lady ministers, 9 lady ministers here. And you speak to them honestly, and I speak to some of them yesterday. I spoke to some of them yesterday. I said, I honestly feel sorry for, how do you manage such things? I've been working on this, for example, event just lightly. And it says, it's tiring, it's depleting. We're very honored to have the Right Honorable, but to get her here and to manage everything, so delicately, she's one of so many people that we are very honored to have here. And we want to ensure that her trip and her visit is second to none. We want to make it memorable. We want her to go back to her home country and say, I actually had a very good experience. I dealt with good people. They have good intentions. They work very hard. They're genuine. And they made my life easier. And actually, the trip was worth it. Her time is very precious. And David Malpass's time is very precious. And Ivanka's time is very precious. So the whole effort mostly is done by ladies here and ministers. And I saw ministers working as logistics. I saw ministers handling admin jobs. I saw ministers receiving people from the airport as protocol teams, ministers. And I look up to them and say, if you can do it, I can do it. And this is where we create hope, we create aspirations. Never look at the bad experience, or try to not to look at the bad experiences and the bad examples. Look at have hope and build hope. And this is, I think, what we need to do through this event. The video that we saw in the beginning of yesterday, the power of influence. We saw a lady firefighter from the UAE. We saw an ice skater from the UAE still wearing her hijab. So the hijab or the abaya does not stop a woman from being smart. The cover has nothing to do with her IQ. So these are the kind of aspirational people that you would look up to and says, if they're there, my daughter can be there. I have a 6-year-old daughter. And guess what she wants to do? She wants to be a ballerina. And I want her to push forward, and I want her to go, as far as she wants. Now, is this something that is odd in the society? It was odd maybe 10, 20 years ago, but I think there will be appetite to have ballerinas in the country. So maybe my daughter will be the #1 ballerina from the UAE. Now, this takes a lot of courage as well in the society where we need to practice openness, inclusion, acceptance, cohesiveness. And I think there are so many things that we live and we need to cherish from around the world. These small things, celebrate the moments rather than feel sorry for yourself and for others. There are so many things that we can celebrate, and we should, because celebration brings positivity, brings energy, brings motive to do something far more worth it for the world.
Couldn't have said that any better. If I were to refer back to something Right Honourable May has mentioned, which is how when a woman does something, people respond to it in a specific way, and then when a man does it, suddenly it's something like such a great idea. There was a lot of concepts that are brought up about how if a man does something, he's found to be firm and he's fair and so on, but when a woman does it, they find her to be stern or I would say aggressive. So these different connotations on the same action, when a woman tries to prove herself just to be as firm as the man, it's brought off to be aggressive. What are your thoughts on that? Is this something that any of you have actually experienced or witnessed? Is this something that can be battled, if we can say?
Yeah, so this is something I've experienced on my student government. Every time, sometimes when I do actions, I wonder, did I do that because I am a woman, or did I do that because I meant to do that? And I think it brings about two sides of the gender representation issue. One is that, do you want a genderless experience? So should we treat each other as if we are not male and female? But many people would argue, and I think I'm also on that camp, that that denies an essential part of who you are, just as much as I am Zimbabwean, just as much as I am anything else. And so how, I guess my question to you, in your experience, how do you negotiate those two poles of gender representation in your work?
I think the key thing actually is just to be yourself. Not feel you've got to act in a particular way, either because you're a woman or because you're in, working with men. Just be yourself and be true to yourself. And I think that's the most important thing to do. But there is a difficulty because for a woman in any key leadership role, people want you to be tough but fair. But they don't want, it's all too easy for a woman being tough to be seen as over-aggressive. Whereas, as you say, if a man behaves like that, then it's normal. That's not sort of commented on. Whereas, and of course, if a woman shows some emotion, then it's, oh, well, she's a woman. If a man shows emotion, it's, oh, he's got some empathy with people. So we've still got a little way to go in that sense, but you're absolutely right. We shouldn't deny who we are, because there are differences. We're all different people. We all have different talents, different experiences. So the key thing is to be true to yourself.
I just want to add, I completely agree, Right Honourable May, because when I worked in government, everyone was saying you have to be strong and you need to exude strength. But then, and I think when you say you want to be true to yourself, you look at your values as your North Star. And I think as women, personally, I think it's not, we can't be true to ourselves if we feel like we want to be genderless. I think part of being a woman is warmth, is kindness. And I think you can show strength and you can balance both and strike both depending on your values and on your actions. But ironically, when you say, I want to show that I'm the leader, or I need to exude strength, I need to be powerful just like men, it becomes like a mirage that as much as you want to try to reach it, it runs away from you. So I think going a step back and reflecting on what your values are and standing by that, I think is unique and effective. And Right Honourable May, correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt like you exuded that perfectly as a leader in the UK.
So this year's Global Women's Forum was held under the theme of the power of influence. It would be nice to hear from all of you what you think an influential woman is. If you've met any influential women in your life, feel free to share.
Can I?
Of course.
I'll start with something. This is a very small book, and it's about the state of the Arab world from a youth lens on SDGs. So basically what we've done here, an influencer might not be, I'm sorry to say that, a president or a prime minister or a minister or a director general or a CEO of a company or. We've documented stories of women where they saw a challenge in their societies and they decided to do something different. And this is where aspirations come from. A lady here from Palestine Her name is Basma. She started a company called Khuyut. Khuyut means threads. Threads. There are more than 370,000 refugees, Palestinian refugees in Jordan. And those people are in certain sites and they cannot go out, they cannot go and start a business or work. They don't have work permits and so on. So she decided to do something for them. With $10,000, she has small means, she decided to start a company called Khuyut, and she started training them on how to do embroidery, tailoring. She supplied them with the machines, so on and so on and so on. She and they sell their products now online, and she's helping hundreds of women in the refugee sites of Jordan, making their own living, educating their children, taking care of themselves, as well as their small families. This is SDG. What kind of SDGs did she touch? She touched no hunger. She touched quality health, quality education, gender balance, no poverty, you name it. So we try to document some of these stories, and you will read them and you say, amazing, average people from Iraq, from Tunis, from Jordan, from Palestine, from Sudan, and you look at them and say, those people, they see a suffering of others and they decide to make a move. A move might cost $100 or a move might cost Basma $10,000, but the impact is massive. So we can always look up to the CEO of Pepsi Cola. Or we can look at, for example, from the region, Lubna Al-Ulayan from Saudi, and say, wow. Or we look at, for example, Minister Hassa or Minister Sara here. But there are also the Basmas of this world. In every single society, whether you're in the States, whether in the UK, whether you're in Japan or China or Australia or South Africa or Argentina, there are people and there are women that can be documented as case studies, that can be, their stories can be told to the world. We have lots of media entities here. If they get the chance, and again, my apologies, if they get the chance of 5 minutes airtime to interview Shamma or Right Honorable Theresa May or to interview Basma, they will choose the two ladies here. So how could the media, with the media anchors and the media that, air, and there are billions of people watching them, they should show more and more heroes of this world that I can relate to and you can relate to, each one of us. We will love to be like her Right Honorable Theresa May and Shamma and Muna and Uhud and so many leaders. But we can also do something totally different, yet unique and yet has so much value to our societies. And the impact will be no less than what the ladies are doing in their own societies.
I can't agree with him more because actually the person that influenced, or the woman that influenced me the most would be my mom. Like, it might be quite obvious, but I think first, like, she knows me best, and if I were to quickly share her story, when she was little, or like when she was in university, my mom wanted to study fashion. So she had this amazing opportunity to go to Tokyo. I'm from South Korea, but she had an opportunity to go to Tokyo and study fashion, but my grandpa didn't allow her at the time because he said it was too dangerous for a woman to travel alone to a foreign country and do fashion, so she couldn't do that anymore. So now she gave up fashion, and honestly, like, yes, it's true that she regrets it a lot, but my mom actually a few years ago opened up a restaurant, and now it's not something that she thought she would be doing, but now she has this restaurant, and every day she finds joy in actually doing it. She says she doesn't enjoy cooking that much, but it's interesting. I mean, I personally think she's a great chef. Like, at home, like, I loved her food, but now she actually, like, made that into a business. And honestly, like, when I look at her, I've never thought of being a businesswoman myself, but like looking at her sacrifices, like, a lot of my friends' moms are actually like traveling, enjoying leisure, going golfing, where like my mom has to actually give up all that and like stay in her restaurant until I don't know, like 2 a.m., like just cooking or actually like preparing for the next day and doing all these things. But honestly, like looking at her, yes, like she may have gave up whatever she wanted to do because she was a woman. But I think now she really empowers me to think that I can do something like by myself, maybe not by choice, but you know, it's working out.
I think, can I add something to that? So I think one critical thing that I draw from the past two comments is that, I mean, I would have said the same, my mom, and it's probably a common answer for a lot of people in this room. And I think that leads to one thing, because you were also speaking about being a father, and that made me think about my own father, that women empowerment is very personal, and influence is very multidimensional. It's not something that can be labeled. There's no definition that can tell you what influence can mean. And I think perhaps the way I would interpret influence is having, of course, having, I mean, the role model effect is very effective, clearly, you know, having people representing specific fields like the first woman pilot and etc., the youngest minister in the world that we have sitting down here. And we have so many of that, and we're very fortunate in the UAE. But I think also it goes beyond looking at the ways in which you can be a token representation. It's also about the invisible influences that start in the family, that start in the home, that then trickle through. And so although, you know, we're very fortunate to have a lot of state-led initiatives that empower women, there are also a lot of maybe more, I don't know if grassroots is the right word, but more kind of societal and community-based conversations that are stirring up, especially amongst the youth, that I think is having a really important impact on women empowerment and on the power of influence as this theme. As the theme happens to be for this conference.
Definitely. Well, I'm just about to ask the last question for our session today, and I think it's the one that has a lot of relevance to our youth circuit, and it is: how can youth play a role in achieving gender balance and pushing for that feeling where we don't feel like there's a difference anymore? So I would love to hear answers from all of you, from Right Honorable May, from Your Excellency. Feel free to pitch in.
So I think it's really important for us to take responsibility, and especially for the men too, because we can't play a role by being a role model. I can't be the first female. I want to be a judge in the US, but if I become a judge, I wouldn't be the first female judge because I'm not a woman. But then, so I need to look for other alternative ways to have a positive influence. And I think it's really important for us to be an ally to the movement of gender equality, for me to view my colleagues and peers for their capabilities instead of viewing them as in a box of as like a woman and associating certain traits with it. But actually on that, in the question of how we can play the role of an ally, I wanted to ask Right Honorable May and Honorable Shama about how could men be effective allies for women in terms of fighting for gender equality and equal representation, and how have some men you've met in your life been helpful to you in that sense?
Well, I think actually we've talked about some of the things, and you yourself have spoken about one of the issues, which is for men to have that, if you like, open-minded attitude that doesn't have a stereotype view, and that it does encourage, and it's good to see young men sitting here around in this youth circle as well, because this isn't just about women, and if it's seen as just an issue for women, then it won't succeed, as well as if it's seen as something that is normal and natural and for us all, if we're going to have a better society. So I think what you said about, but encouraging other young men to see that this isn't something that should be pigeonholed as for the women, but actually something that we should all be interested in, making sure that in all our societies, everybody's able to play their full part. And as I say, for each individual, how far you go, whether you want to be a leader or not, is down to you and your talents and your hard work. But everybody being able to choose to lead that fulfilling life for them in whatever area it's going to be, and not feel that they have to do something simply because they're a woman, or indeed simply because they're a man. It's about them and their individual talents.
My 2 cents on that is, one is young men can influence up, whether it's governments or society, etc., not by simply being an example, but I think you can be a shining example of how gender equality is important and involving everyone. The second is maybe influence across peer level, where issues related to women are always tackled by women, and women are the ones who try to kind of fight for their case. I think having men stand up, whether in the boardrooms or meeting rooms or university clubs, when someone silos a woman aside, I think it's important for men to stand up. And I remember the he for she that was started by maybe the United Nations still continues up to date, and the issues that they still raise haven't been addressed until now, which is, if not now, when can we? And I think it's up to young people to take that realm.
Hello, everyone. Just on that, I think it's, just as he said, it's a matter of attitude. It's having that understanding. It's not that it's not a competition. My colleague's success, my male colleague's success is not deteriorating my success, my progress. So it's just having that understanding that it's not me against you, it's not a he against she, but it's me and him together. And if he does something and I can learn from him, then I can go and I can learn from him. And if he ever has something to learn from me, I'll be more than happy to share it with him. So it's just that it's not a competition. It's just us working together and having that idea or that thought, that question constantly. What does that person's success mean to me? Does it affect me negatively? If it doesn't, then why am I against it, regardless of what gender that person I'm working with identifies with? So that's just how I see it.
Hi. So I'm currently representing 3 organizations from the US and the UK, Restless Development, the Global Goals, and Action for Sustainable Development. And the beginning of January, they decided to create a youth of 12 panelists from across the globe. And I'm very happy to be representing the Middle East on this panel. So what we're trying to do, we started with a youth campaign. I don't know if you saw it. It's the I, world leaders, we are watching you. That was our first achievement. And then we are trying to raise funds, and then we're going to give them to youth-led campaigns around the globe. And I think that this is how youth can play a major role in advancing other youth and then voicing their concerns and opinions. So, thank you.
Honorable Theresa May, Your Excellency Sham al-Mazroui, distinguished guests. First, let us agree that the current position of UAE is a product of the woman participation, no doubt about it. But sometimes I get confused by some themes when we say, for example, gender equality. As my understanding is that gender equality is that we should remove all obstacles from that hinder the woman's participation. Second, provide equal opportunities. This is the equality. I need your opinion about this. But sometimes we keep seeing things that sounds unequal. When we say, for example, male has sometimes a firm judgment, or woman has emotions more than men, or then I think we are contradicting ourselves sometimes. So I don't know. What do you think about this? Thank you.
Well, I think it's important always to recognise that certain characteristics aren't solely held by either men or women. But we speak very often in generalities. But you're right, it's important to recognise the characteristics and talents that each individual brings to any particular role, rather than assuming that, as we were talking earlier about the sort of greater listening skills that women have, there are some men who have great listening skills. There are some women who don't have listening skills. It's just a generality that by and large you will see, and what I've seen in politics is that slight difference, or more natural difference between the two. But it is us together, as you say, And as the we previously heard as well, it's not that women are saying we've got to be in all the leadership positions and we don't want any men in the leadership positions. What we're saying is we should have the right people in leadership positions, but that doesn't mean it won't be women. And that's the important thing. It's about the individuals and their talents. And it's about women, the more women who know that they can, or feel that they can be in those positions, then the better we will all be. Because decisions in government are better if they're made by a more diverse group of people with different experience, different ideas, different, having had that different background. Then you get the debate, then you get the discussion, then you get the better decisions coming out.
Definitely, I couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, this is the end of our youth circle. As I mentioned, this is the end, but it is definitely not the end of this discussion. So we'd love to urge you as individuals to push forward on the topic of gender balance and to work on it on yourselves from within, as well within your broader community. Right Honourable May, thank you so much for giving us your time today. It is such an honour to be in your presence. And thank you so much, all of you, for attending today.